This is the third in my series of being a good ally. And it seems that as these come up, there are opportunities that come up for us to do just that. Right after I shared about being an ally in regards to race and ethnicity, some of us spoke at the Brunswick City Council, sharing our desire that the Confederate statue be removed. We are still waiting for the outcome of that, but we had a good turnout, and I felt like we did a good job as allies and folks that were at that meeting. And then just this past week, I was called to share with the Statesboro City Council to encourage the passage of the proposed non-discrimination ordinance after one congregation in town began urging their members to show up and request that provisions related to LGBTQ discrimination be removed from the ordinance. I shared with you when I read the story that I would be especially focusing on, here's a picture of me at the city council meeting, by the way. We were masked and safe. I shared with you when I talked about the story this morning about Gabrielle that I was going to be focusing especially on trans people. So you may be asking, why trans? Don't they all matter? Well, yes, this is sort of like saying we should say all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matter, though. And I heard a good biblical reference that you can use when this happens. Here it is. This is the parable of the shepherd and the sheep. You may remember this from the Bible. So Jesus was telling his disciples about this story, and to tell them about the 99 sheep, and one of the sheep had disappeared from the others. So the shepherd went to look for it, to rescue it. And the disciples said, well, what about the 99? Don't they matter? And Jesus said something like, well, of course they matter, but the one is especially endangered now. So the shepherd is focusing on it. So that's something you can share with folks when they wonder why you say Black Lives Matter or trans lives matter. Sometimes we need to have a special focus on a particular group. And that is true today. There are key challenges for transgender people in our world. Despite the dramatic progress of the transgender movement in the last decades, resulting in greater public awareness and significant legal victories, trans people continue to face blatant discrimination, high levels of violence, and poor health outcomes. Trans people of color often face markedly worse health and economic outcomes as they navigate multiple systems of oppression. So I'm just highlighting some of the key issues with these symbols for you. One of the issues is health. Transgender people face enormous health disparities, including staggering rates of HIV infection, lack of primary care, including individualized medically necessary transition-related health care, and high rates of attempted suicide. And then there's economics. Transgender people bear the economic consequences of discrimination, including high rates of poverty and unemployment, discrimination in education, and homelessness. Trans people are more than twice as likely to live in extreme poverty, that's earning less than $1,000 a year, with Latinx transgender people facing 3.5 times and Black transgender people facing 3 times the poverty rate of the general US population. So there's a lot of the interrelationships of these identities and what happens. And then another thing that's very concerning is safety. Transgender people and Black transgender women especially experience frightening levels of physical violence. This is particularly true among transgender people participating in sex work and other informal or criminalized economics. Brutal murders of transgender women occur with such alarming regularity, often with little response from law enforcement, that the American Medical Association declared violence against transgender people an epidemic in 2019. And then civil rights. Recognition and respect for the civil rights of trans people is critically important because their legal needs span many aspects of life. These needs include identity documents that accurately reflect who they are, protections from employment discrimination, and immigration rights, to name only a few. Fortunately, we have lots of resources to help us to be good allies. The organization GLAD provides tips for allies of transgender person. I'm going to share some of these with you today. When you become an ally of transgender people, your actions will help change the culture, making society a better, safer place for transgender people and for all people, trans or not, who do not conform to conventional gender expectations. So here are some of their tips for those of us who want to help. First, you can't tell if someone is transgender just by looking. Transgender people don't look any certain way or come from any one background. Many transgender people do not appear visibly trans, meaning they are not perceived to be transgender by others. It is not possible to look around a room and see if there are any transgender people. It would be like looking around the room to see if there are any gay people. You should assume that there may be transgender people and non-binary people at any gathering. By the way, all of the people on this slide are transgender. Second, don't make assumptions about a transgender person's sexual orientation. Now, I hope you remember back, if you don't, you can go back and read it, the sermon I did back in June, where I shared all the definitions and we had a lot of education about all of these terms and what all about gender and sexuality. But gender identity is different than sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is about who we're attracted to. Gender identity is about our own personal sense of being a man or a woman or outside the gender binary. Transgender people can be gay or lesbian or bisexual or straight. You shouldn't make assumptions about sexual orientation for anyone, cis or trans. If this confuses you, please go back and read that sermon or other information on gender and sexuality. But it is different. Don't make assumptions. Along with that, if you don't know what pronouns to use, the GLAD folks say, first of all, just listen. Just listen. If you're unsure, because probably someone who knows the person will probably use the correct pronoun. So if you can just listen for a while, you may figure it out. If you must ask which pronoun the person uses, start with your own. You can say, hi, I'm Alex, and I use the pronouns he and him. You know, what about you? Then that person's pronoun, use that person's pronoun, and encourage others to do so. So there are a lot of possibilities for pronouns, folks. If you accidentally use the wrong pronoun, apologize quickly and sincerely, then move on. The bigger deal you make of the situation, the more uncomfortable it is for everyone. There are a whole lot of possibilities, as you see here. I'm not going to go through all these because it seems like they is winning the day. And yes, singular they is now okay. So you can use they, them, and their. Many years ago, we made singular you okay and quit using the very formal thou and thine for singular other person. We use you for a single or a plural. We can do the same thing with they. So if you're one of those grammar people that comes after me for this, just stop. They is a singular, they is now okay. Okay. Now, don't ask a transgender person what their real name is. Please don't do that. For some transgender people, being associated with their birth name is a tremendous source of anxiety, or it is simply a part of their life they wish to leave behind. Respect the name a transgender person is currently using, or a non-binary person. If you happen to know the name someone was given at birth but no longer used, don't share it without the person's explicit permission. Like Jabrielle gave me permission to use Jonathan in that story that I wrote. Similarly, don't share photos of someone from them before their transition unless you have their permission. Some gender non-conforming folks are choosing gender neutral names. And folks, I messed up the other day with one of our folks because I did not realize that they had modified their name. I apologize, and I will try to remember from now on. Be patient with a person who is questioning or exploring their gender identity. A person who is questioning and exploring their gender identity may take some time to figure out what's true for them. Don't be like, well, make up your mind, you know? They might, for example, use a name or pronoun and then later decide at a later time to change the name or pronoun again. Do your best to be respectful and use the name and pronoun requested. Understand that there is no right or wrong way to transition, and that it's different for every person. So don't make assumptions about how someone is doing it. Some transgender people access medical care like hormones and surgeries as part of their transition to align their bodies with their gender identity. Some transgender people want their authentic gender identity to be recognized without hormones or surgery. Some transgender people cannot access medical care, hormones, and/or surgeries due to a lack of financial resources or access to health care. A transgender person's identity is not dependent on medical procedures or their physicality, except that if someone tells you they are transgender, they are. And please realize that coming out is different for a trans person than it is for lesbian, gay, and bisexual folks. We kind of many times the LGBT folks say, oh, you know, we should all come out and be proud. But it's different for transgender folks. If they want to out themselves, that's fine. But many are very comfortable just living their lives in the gender that is right for them. So don't push that. And then don't ask a transgender about a transgender person's genitals or surgical status or sex life. Please. It would be inappropriate to ask a non-transgender or cisgender person about the appearance or status of their genitals. It is equally inappropriate to ask a transgender person these questions. Don't ask a transgender person if he's had the surgery, if they've had the surgery, or if they are pre-op or post-op. If a transgender person wants to talk to you about such matters, they will bring it up. Similarly, it wouldn't be appropriate to ask a non-transgender person about how they have sex. We wouldn't ask a cis person. So the same courtesy should be extended to a transgender person. And avoid backhanded compliments and what we might consider as helpful tips. While you may intend to be supportive, comments like the following can be hurtful or even be insulting. Here's some of them. I would have never known you were transgender. You look so pretty. You look just like a real woman. She's so gorgeous, I would have never guessed she was transgender. He's so hot, I'd date him even though he's transgender. You're so brave. You'd pass so much better if you wore less or more makeup, had a better wig, etc. Have you ever considered a voice coach? Just no. No. Okay. So that's a lot about don't do this. But I'm like, what else can we do? What else can we do? We want to try to help. You know, most of us are like, we want to help. Well, here's some possibilities. Challenge anti-transgender remarks or jokes in public places, including LGBT spaces. You may hear anti-transgender comments from anti-LGBTQ activists, but you may also hear them from lesbian, gay, bisexual people. Someone may think that because they're gay, it's okay for them to use certain words or tell jokes about transgender people. It's important to challenge anti-transgender remarks or jokes whenever they're said, and no matter who says them. Of course, we should do this across the way. You know, I can remember many years ago when people told all those, what they called Polak jokes. You remember that, you older folks? That was a thing people would do about Polish people tell Polak jokes. I was a young teacher and I was in the teacher's lounge and they were telling those jokes. And I said to them, you know, I'm sorry, but you realize my grandparents are Polish? And then they were, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, well, please don't do that anymore. And then, of course, my grandparents are Polish, and I told them they weren't. But just intercede, and share it. That's not funny, So what else? Support all gender public restrooms. Some transgender and gender nonconforming people may feel like they match the signs on the restroom door. Encourage schools, businesses, and agencies to have single user, unisex, and all gender restroom options. They might not feel like they do match it, So it's better to have all gender options if we can. And if we don't, make it clear that they can go, they're free to use whichever restroom they want to use. That's George Takei in that t-shirt. I bought one of them. You can pee next to me, right? He had that out back when the North Carolina laws were going around about that. At meetings and at events, set an inclusive tone. We've just got to get used to using different kinds of words. In a group setting, you can identify people by articles of clothing if you want to call them, instead of using gendered language. For example, say the person in the blue shirt instead of the woman in the front. Something like that. Get used to using those kinds of things and not use so much gendered language. Similarly, sir and madam are best avoided. And know your limitations as an ally. Don't be afraid to admit when you don't know something. It is better to admit you don't know something than to make assumptions or say something that may be incorrect or hurtful. Seek out the appropriate resources that will help you learn more. A lot of this we don't have to depend, just as we don't have to depend on Black folks and people of color to educate us, because they've already put so much out there. The same thing's true of trans. There's a lot of resources you can look at to help you and to help you get to that point you need to be at. Be willing to provide financial help if possible. It's often hard for trans folks, especially trans women, and even more especially trans women of color, to make it financially. I've known trans women who did resort to sex work, and this is not uncommon and should not be judged so easily by those of us in more privileged positions. I personally am currently helping 2 trans women with some day-to-day expenses just to help them make it to their jobs or counseling, etc. Because at this point in their lives, without some additional help, they may return to addictions and prostitution. Now, it's true that I don't want to enable them, so I'm careful about how and what I give, but I'm glad I can help. Now, my friend Jabrielle, that we heard about in our story, doesn't need that help for her day-to-day expenses. She still does have her bus driving job, but she is hoping to get some help so that she can have her gender confirmation surgery. She is someone that is planning to have the surgery, and she's shared with me that it would be fine for me to share this with you. She's been saving up for it, and she's about halfway there. She's putting it aside. She's got to get up to $32,150. She's given me permission to pass this along to you. And if you feel that you can write a check to help her, you just contact me and I will share with you how you can contribute. Now, thank you for allowing me to focus today on the transgender folks and how we can be better allies. But I want to bring this back to the more general topic as I move toward the end of my message. This slide with the 2 flags provides many ways to be good allies for LGBTQ plus folks. And yes, they do overlap. They overlap with some of the things I've shared in my other ally messages. If you look at them, you can see that. And with what I've shared about being a good trans ally. All of our LGBTQ plus friends need for us to remain strong allies. They need to know that they can call on us and we will be there. Yes, we now have marriage equality, hallelujah. I married 2 guys yesterday on my back porch in Statesboro. But we still have a lot of homophobia and hate in our society. And I think that has arisen more in the last few years because of the division and hate promoted by some of our leaders. And I really look at that last one that says, accept your limitations. Because as you try to be an ally for LGBTQ plus people, let me tell you, I've been doing this for decades and decades. You are going to mess up. I did that yesterday with someone, something I said to a gay friend. I used a phrase that was inappropriate and was questioned on it by him and realized it. So I apologized and I will do better. Now, here's the main thing we need to do, though. We need to do this. Here is the main thing we need to do. We need to vote. Vote, folks. I do not endorse candidates or parties from this pulpit, but I will encourage you to vote your UU values and to encourage others who have those values to vote as well. That can make a huge difference with all of these things. This is serious, folks. This is serious. My friend, Marcus Toole, gave me permission to share a quote that he shared this past week with the city council, and Al Hackle quoted him in the paper with this. Now, Marcus was very emotional and passionate about the input that had been given to the city from some religious leaders in our community and state. So religious leaders who said they were basing their remarks about removing the transgender non-discrimination part related to LGBTQ people. And they were saying they were basing that on their religious convictions. And this is what Marcus said to the city council about that. He said, people have used religious conviction as an excuse to marginalize us, to fire us, to kill us, he said. We don't go after them. They always come after us. And they have done so for thousands of years. They have burned us at the stake. They have thrown us off buildings. They have hung us. They have stoned us. And they have excluded us from every area of society. So I urge you, please protect us. Please protect us. I think I can speak for all of you in our congregations and tell Marcus and others that we will be there to speak out, speak up, to care for you, to love you, and to welcome you to our places of worship with open arms as we realize that we know ourselves we need to continue to grow and learn, and we need to become better allies. But we welcome you as we do that. Indeed, we UUs stand, as the song says, gay and straight, and all of the other letters of our diversity together as we side with love. May it be so.